everyone. We're just going to give everyone a minute or two to trickle in, but we'll keep going through the slideshow during that time. All righty. I think we have a good amount of people in, so we can go ahead and get started. Good evening. My name is Judy Norton, and on behalf of the Young Professionals Board of the John Howard Association, thank you all so much for joining this year's Toast to Justice, Visual Arts in Prison as a Healing Practice. It promises to be a very captivating and enlightening conversation. And I'm pleased to let you all know that as of this morning, we have sold over 70 event tickets and have raised nearly $9,000 in gross proceeds to support the important work of the John Howard Association. So I want to just take a moment and thank everyone here and to those who have donated. In addition to that, we've received dozens of donations from vendors across the city that we are excited to raffle off after this evening's panel. So you're welcome to purchase raffle tickets up until the end of tonight's event. So we encourage you to take a look at some of the really exciting prizes that we have and enter by purchasing tickets via the Toast to Justice event site. So founded in 1901, the John Howard Association of Illinois is a nonprofit, nonpartisan organization dedicated to advocating for a fair, humane, and effective criminal justice system. As the only citizen correctional oversight organization in the state, JHA serves as the eyes and ears of the public within the Illinois prison system, monitoring conditions of confinement and treatment of incarcerated people across the state, making sure that information available to the public and using the data to advocate for structural change. Tonight's conversation will dive into programs that introduce visual arts practice to incarcerated people across Illinois, highlighting two programs that take innovative approaches to introducing the liberatory practice of visual expression in Illinois prisons. Our guests tonight are Damon Locke, Pablo Mendoza, and Lloyd Joe Reynolds, and tonight's discussion will be moderated by Jinya Sweeney. Damon Locke is a Chicago-based visual artist, educator, vocalist, and musician. He attended the Art Institute of Chicago, where he received his BFA. Since 2014, he has been working with the Prisons and Neighborhood Arts Project at Stateville Correctional Center teaching art. He is a recipient of the Helen Coburn Meyer and Tim Meyer Achievement Award in the Arts and the 2016 Maker Grant. He operated as an artist mentor in the Chicago Arts Coalition program Fieldwork. In 2017, he became a Soros Justice Media Fellow. In 2019, he became a 3 Arts Awardee. He recently completed 4 years as an artist in residence as a part of the Museum of Contemporary Art Space program, introducing civically engaged art into the curriculum of Sarah E. Good STEM Academy High School. In the spring of 2022, he taught his first semester in the sound department on improvisation at the School of Art Institute of Chicago, and Damon leads the Black Monument Ensemble as a founding member of the Band of the Eternals. Pablo Mendoza is a proud father, community organizer, and aspiring researcher. He has served 22 years in the Illinois Department of Corrections, where he managed to educate himself despite the endless challenges to access higher education and prison programming. The pinnacle of his academic career was with the University of Illinois Education Justice Project, where he was introduced to the concept of critical pedagogy and performed a platform with which to exercise his agency and advocate for change. His first line of employment upon his release was with the Parole Illinois as a lead organizer, where he oversaw the organizing efforts of 5 fellow organizers and assisted with legislative strategies. He is currently working as a project manager and research fellow for the Prison and Neighborhood Art Education Project, where he looks to establish a community center for families of the incarcerated. He will soon be transitioning to the role of director. Pablo continues his connection to the University of Illinois by working as an advisor on the Reentry Guide Initiative. He also volunteers as a steering committee member for the Freedom to Learn campaign, where he looks to assure higher educational programming is accessible in the Illinois Reentry Alliance for Justice, where he assists in the evaluation of the Alliance and works to facilitate connections between the reentry community and the reentry service providers with an eye towards making reentry a success. When free time avails itself, he enjoys exercising, art, music, long runs, and peace only nature can bring. Lori Jo Reynolds is a policy advocate and artist who challenges the demonization, warehousing, and social exclusion of people in the criminal legal system. She was the organizer of TAM's Year 10, the grassroots campaign to close the notorious Illinois State Supermax prison. And along with Solitary Watch, she co-leads the ongoing participatory project Photo Requests from Solitary. Reynolds also coordinates the Chicago 400 Alliance, the volunteer grassroots campaign challenging public conviction registries and banishment laws, and engaging organizational partners in research, advocacy, art, and direct aid. She also serves on the board of the Prison Policy Initiative, the Board of Narrative Arts, and is the UIC faculty advisor to the Yes Apply Illinois campaign to remove invasive and humiliating questions about past convictions from the admissions process in public higher education. She's an associate professor at art at UIC. Our moderator, Ginia Sweeney, is a member of the John Howard Association Young Professionals Board and is the Associate Director of Interpretation at the Art Institute of Chicago. Her focus lies in expanding access to the visual arts through engaging and accessible narratives that create a sense of relevance for a range of audiences. And at any point tonight during tonight's discussion, please feel free to type your questions into the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. We'll reserve the last 10 minutes or so of the event to answer any audience questions. So from there, I can hand it over to Ginia to begin the discussion.
Thank you so much, Judy, and thank you to everyone who's joining us this evening. Damon, Pablo, Lori, welcome. Thank you for joining me for this conversation about the intersection of the arts and our system of incarceration. I'm eager to hear about the important work that you each have been doing and to discuss the impact that the arts have on incarceration, both from an individual and a policy perspective. I'd like to start with each of the participants kind of talking about the nature of the projects that they're involved in, starting with Damon and Pablo. Could you tell me about the mission of the Prison and Neighborhood Arts and Education Project and your roles within the organization? And Damon, would you like to go first?
Sure, I'll go first. The Prison and Neighborhood Arts and Education Project has been happening since around 2013, 2012, 2013. I started 2014. I started teaching with the program as a teaching artist. And then we offered arts and humanities classes in kind of a college semester format. So it'd be art classes, poetry classes, you know, various humanities classes. And as we have grown and expanded, we now have a University Without Walls program, which has a degree granting program in partnership with Northeastern Illinois University. We have a think tank where we work with incarcerated individuals, talking about how we can build out the program. We have guest lecturers of thinkers and activists And we do a variety of like cultural events, exhibitions and mural projects and book projects. So that's essentially the PNAP project. I've been there since, as I said, 2014, and have become part of the leadership committee as well, and help the program grow. And in that growth, Pablo has joined us to extend our reach.
Thank you, Damon. Thank you. That was awesome. Well, as Damon so eloquently mentioned, we teach inside Stateville, and we also, from them classes create a work product that then becomes like the mural project, as Damon was talking about. When we hosted these events in the past, family members of those who were creating this art, whether it be spoken word or visual art, would come out then and then join the space when we had the mural projects out in the community. And we thought, oh wow, this is awesome. We could now bypass these walls and build bridges with this art. And therein came in the vision of Walls Turn Sideways, the initiative that I am part of, which is the portion of the neighborhood part of the Prison Neighborhoods Art and Education Project. In February of 2021, myself and a colleague, Sarah Ross, ventured upon a research project where we were looking to see if a community space where we can exhibit art would be needed in a community for corrective purposes, right? To like bring about healing in our research came up with a resounding yes. We not only we not only interviewed folks who were directly impacted, but we also interviewed some community organizers in the process. And in there, created a vision for Walls Turn Sideways, and where we're hoping to provide some programming to both bring in political education and healing to the space. But our nexus would be the art. We offer art as a vehicle as a connective tissue between the inside and the outside. So we will be primarily exhibiting art, but then of course, providing some programming around it. And that is our current venture. We're getting ready to open up our doors at 3703 West Chicago Avenue. Hopefully, fingers crossed, August, latest September. And we're hoping, to have all the folks here maybe come by and visit us.
That's wonderful to hear about. Could you tell me a little bit more about what that space will be like and what people can expect when it's open?
Absolutely. So the space would be an art exhibition space for the product that's being created inside. For example, our first exhibition space, our first exhibition will exhibit Archie Cheney's art. Archie Cheney is big on I'm trying to think, comics. So we were going to create a comic workshop around the exhibit where the community can come in and maybe create their own comics, right? But we will also have monthly installments where we have events like we have a section of programming for political education. We work very closely with organizations like Chicago Votes, who fight heavily for voting rights, both inside and outside of prison. And of course, Lori Jo Reynolds, Chicago 400, saying she advocates for the homeless and those who are directly impacted and, kind of defeat some of the hurdles that are out there. These are social ills that plague the community where we're looking to be involved in. And we specifically targeted this West Side community because it has many of our students, but it also has a high number of returning citizens coming to its to the community. So we wanted to make sure we were there to be in community and making sure that we're not having blind spots. We teach on the inside, but as somebody who has been directly incarcerated, when you incarcerated one, you incarcerated our whole community and our families as well. We want to make sure that they're getting the attention they need, and we're bringing forth traditional healing methods that are not mainstream, but are more culturally inclusive of the population, right? So, we're bringing some of that, and also some conflict resolution methods for the younger folks. And then we're gonna have a program where we're modeling under like Hamago, that's hang out, make art, and just geek out, where I'm just planning on, drawing on gym shoes and t-shirts and the stuff I like to do as a kid, so that when the youth are passing by, they have something to catch their eye, catch their attention, come in, hang out, we just make some art and create some positive movement going forward.
That's wonderful to hear about. I have some images pulled up on the screen here of the community mural project, which you both mentioned, and I wonder if we could hear a little about how that project works and how it serves as this kind of connective tissue that you both mentioned between kind of the inside and the outside.
Would you like a crack at that, Damon, or would you like me?
No, I'd say you can keep going, Pablo.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Yeah, Damon will have a lot of the insight of what goes on the inside when we're creating this stuff. But what you're seeing here is the end result of classes that were taught on the inside. And these were mural classes that were being taught. They provide a specific subject matter that's kind of derived through some kind of social change that we're trying to advocate for. And the guys inside go through the process of developing it, start to finish. In the meantime, they're also getting art lessons that help them develop their craft. It then gets brought out to the outside, where we section off these portions and put them on these 4x8 boards, which we then set out and tables and come together in community to actually paint these things. I'm making it sound very simple. It's not. It takes a lot of logistics. It takes a lot of planning, and of course, we want to make sure there's a safe space for those who attend. So and of course, we got to have some entertainment, right? So we need some good music. Damon's always helpful in that front. And basically what we're doing here is what I used to see when I would send art home to my loved one, and that's people just coming in community and getting out of that isolation. There's a big stigma around incarceration. Folks here don't have to hide. Everybody shares a common cause, and it's a missing loved one. And it's sad that we come together in that, in that light, but we are together in community, and there is so much beautiful things that happen here. Young kids getting involved in different endeavors, and just meeting the family members of our students. That's just a big plus.
I'd like to now talk a little bit about another of your recent undertakings at PNAP, which is the 51st Free State Project. Damon, do you want to talk a little bit about this project and what it consisted of and some of the goals? I'm going to pull up some of the images here.
Sure, I would be happy to talk about it. The 51st Free State Project was a project that was created by 4 of the instructors of PNAP at Stateville: myself, Sarah Ross, Anna Martine Whitehead, and Aaron Hughes, where we had 4 semesters planned out that kind of leapfrogged off of each other, taking on the ideas around what if we were creating a 51st free state, what would that look like? So Sarah, in her semester, they created anthems and flags and symbols, things that are part of this idea of the state and what those would mean and what they would look like. Anna Martine picked up on creating scores for movement pieces based on some of those same themes. I picked up on the themes of liberation and lost place and transformation and change, and taught a graphic novel or comics class. And then Aaron Hughes was doing set design projects, creating backdrops and mural ideas based around all of the things that we were investigating in all of the classes. One of the issues that we came up against, the idea was that we would then take all of this material to create a large performance piece where we would have all of this material be set design for a piece where the scores would be built out by dancers that Martine would put together, and the comics would be part of the booklet and pamphlets, and the set design would be the staging that we put in. But during the second class, the movement class, that's when COVID hit. And so we had to switch everything to correspondence. And, it's hard to make dance scores and everything happen in this era. So it has been slowed down, but we are still working hard to continue to push this project along. Right now, a bunch of it is in the DePaul Art Museum exhibition currently, called Remaking the Exceptional. A bunch of the work is in there right now. A bunch of the stuff that you're seeing on the screen is in there right now. And next month, Martine and I will be presenting some programming where I will be interpreting some of the anthems that were written in the first class and adding music to it. And Martine will be interpreting the movement scores. So we are working hard to continue this project and help it grow and build. And that's just some of the ways that we're trying as a project to continually think on expansion and how we can bring the neighborhood into the project, and how we can create art that touches and engages people in so many ways.
Thanks so much. I'd like to turn to Lori now. Lori, would you give us some background on your work as both a policy advocate and an artist?
Sure, I think I'm on now. So I have a PowerPoint with stuff on it to show you, and I'll put that up in just one sec. But thanks so much for having me, and it's really great to be here, especially with Pablo and Damon. And I'm going to talk, I sort of thought about what to talk about and thought it might be interesting to talk about the role of photography. Well, the role that photography and art played in some of the work in Illinois to challenge prison conditions in the early 21st century, so long ago. And so I thought maybe I would start with the TAMS campaign, but just talk about, kind of a long list of ways that we used photography in that. So let me just share my screen and get that out of the way. Presenter view. Oh no, wait, I have to share first, sorry. Okay, I trust that you can see this. So I'm going to start for the young people who don't remember that much about TAMS. That TAMS is a supermax prison at the tip of Southern Illinois that was designed for sensory deprivation, and it opened in 1998 to put people in permanent solitary confinement. So no phone calls, no contact visits, no communal activity. Men never left the cell except to exercise alone in a concrete pen or in a cage if they were considered mentally ill. And food was pushed through a slot in the cell door. So it was a really extreme form of solitary confinement, which is, of course, still happening in other prisons, but this was designed only for solitary. And interaction and sensory stimulation are physiological needs. So without them, our brains go into crisis. And when people break down in solitary confinement, it's not because people are weak. It's because animals are relational creatures and we need interaction for our brain to function. I first learned about TAMS as a member of the Committee to End the Marion Lockdown in the late 1990s. Marion is the federal prison where solitary confinement had been brought back after a pause of about 100 years in American correctional history. But the group itself protested the opening of TAMS. And I recall when the state of Illinois first started posting these photos about 20 years ago, it was a new era to actually put photos of prisoners online and make them accessible to the public. And some prisoners at that time, we called people prisoners then, people in custody, and their moms were really upset about having these degrading mugshots online. And, you know, this was part of the new, at the time, punitive, populist right to know regime of the 1990s, which was like people had the right to know everything about you and put it in the public sphere, like who's in prison and who has a conviction. That was a new thing, that came in with this tough on crime wave. But this was a really unusual situation because the men in TAMS had been in isolation for weeks or, months or even years and felt buried alive and definitely forgotten. And so some of the men actually wanted to be seen. And TAMS, was 7 hours from Chicago, the least visited prison. There was no way to take photos with your family and kids, no way to see your kids or touch your kids. And so some men wanted their families to see them and they wanted proof that they were there. There was kind of no other way to reach people. And so, some people even smiled for these photos. So that was a kind of unusual time for prison photography in that, this was emerging in all the different states. So moving ahead a few years here, to challenge the conditions at TAMS, in 2006, a group of artists started the TAMS Poetry Committee, and that was to provide the men in TAMS with some social contact. And I actually had a pen pal from TAMS, and he sent me a poem that he wanted others to read. And so we sent poems, they sent poems, and Bruce wrote back, "Hi committee, is this for real? I can't believe someone cares enough to send a pick-me-up to the worst of the worst." And men also wrote us about their hallucinations, psychosis, self-mutilation, suicide attempts. These are all expected consequences of solitary confinement. And one man wrote, "Hey, this poetry you're sending is great, but could you please tell the governor what they're doing to us down here?" And it was, after that we launched TAMS Year 10 in 2008, a legislative campaign to reform or close the Supermax at the 10-year anniversary of its opening. And this was an alliance of people who were incarcerated at TAMS, formerly incarcerated people, family members, artists, and a lot of people in PNAP and, all these other campaigns that are still working today. Prison reform was a non-starter 15 years ago. But getting politicians to stand up for men who were labeled the worst of the worst was considered hopeless. And many attorneys said, "This is hopeless, don't do this, it'll make conditions worse." But our main challenge on the campaign was this label, the worst of the worst, and the belief that Supermax prisoners were irredeemable and violent. Of course, a label that's not true and was easily disproven. And so in TAMS Year 10, one of our main organizing principles was to let the men from TAMS speak for themselves because they can undo the myth of the worst of the worst. And if the goal of the campaign in order to succeed was to transform this dehumanizing labels, the former TAMS prisoners were brilliant community leaders and still are, who exposed this category error so easily. So back to photography for just a second, the Poetry Committee responded to every letter that we got. And, people didn't know much about prisons and people wanted to look up the people they were responding to. And that was an interesting discussion in the committee. Should we have people look up people or not? And I was personally opposed to it because I was just wanted to avoid the fear mongering and sensationalizing and the assumptions that come with, essentially what was a mugshot or a rap sheet, this sort of implicit bias and attitudes that people had, especially in the 90s. And I instead thought we should write letters and let, just meet people that way and, one human animal to another, like learn about each other. But of course, I was overruled, and people did look people up, and that did have, I felt, an impact somewhat. But the point of this story is that, I mean, essentially, I was wrong, and I had underestimated the photos and their power. And I also failed to understand their lack of fixed meaning. And so one former TAMS prisoner, Mustafa, who was in TAMS during the campaign, but then got out, he organized a peace fest, and he was adamant about displaying images of everybody who was left behind. So Amy Partridge and Matthias Reagan made this display you see in the background with Amy there. And over the years, we added, we kind of updated the display with notes, testimony, etc. And this prison of faces was a powerful force on the campaign. People would introduce their sons, their brothers, their friends, and the guys, as they were getting out of TAMS, you know, rarely, but occasionally really engaged with this and looked at everybody carefully and talked about everybody. And, you know, it kind of, we started to realize, like, at TAMS, people never saw each other face to face, or anybody, you know, and definitely didn't see everyone together. But they did describe themselves as we, as an imagined community. And this installation of faces really helped people to envision themselves together in a way that they hadn't been able to in prison. And, you know, there's so many classifications and discourses that actually obscure and undermine the shared mutual interests that people do have, especially powerless people. And we don't gain much by seeing each other as separate when we should see each other with forms of solidarity. And these photos really helped with that. Another kind of photo note is that, oh, sorry, this is a really important photo that shows the pictures being updated and kind of how much we leaned on them to think about people as we worked on the campaign. As part of my campaign work, I also looked up all of the men's photos to see if anyone was ever visibly in crisis. And these men you can see here were being held up by two gloved hands. And I mean, these were just the official IDOC photos at that time. That really gives you an understanding of what times were like then, that this was just fine to put online as, you know, here's this guy in TAMS. But if I saw something like this, I contacted the family, prison officials, and even the press. And so again, you're seeing there's more use value in these photos than the prison intended them to have. So we developed many cultural projects during the campaign, more than I have time to discuss, to build support for closing TAMS, and most of them involve photography. I'll just go through a couple, and this is a tactical media campaign done by Jesse Graves and Nicholas Lampert, which was mud stenciling. And this was us doing these mud stencils, but we brought photographers to document this guerrilla activity. And of course, the purpose was so that it would get in the news. And then another project, Photo Request from Solitary, invited the men in isolation at TAMS to request a photo of anything at all, real or imagined. And here's some of the things people asked for. My auntie's house at 63rd and Marshfield facing west. Of course, we got artists to take these photos usually, but also non-artists. Two children at the piano with a rose. And then another one was J-Lo's butt. This project wasn't trying to persuade people about anything in particular. People were not presented with prison cells or even what people experienced in prison, but instead they were presented with what people envision. And when we first got these requests back, I was so struck by the descriptions themselves that I felt like actually making the photo would be redundant, which of course it wasn't. But there's this concept called anamnesis, which you can look up on Wikipedia. And it says it resolves the paradox of knowledge, which is that if you don't know the attributes or properties of something, then you won't recognize it even if you see it. And the converse is true, which is if you do already know the attributes and properties of something, then you shouldn't need to seek it out at all. So in a sense, this concept helped us see that rather than us giving them images, the prisoners were giving us images. And they weren't missing images that the prisoners in TAMS needed. The images were already there, and they were kind of affirming that. Here's a request. Oh, sorry, this is more of a request. But here's a request that Willie made for a colossal cross in Southern Illinois called Bald Knob Cross, which was 5 hours from Chicago. But it wasn't just the cross he wanted us to hold a prayer vigil at the cross to pray for his deliverance from TAMS and to be granted parole. And I just want to get back to the photos that I talked about in the beginning. Some people actually wanted photos of themselves. So we're back to using their photos from, that the IDOC was taking. So Roberto wanted a photo of himself to send his family. He said just his ID photo with a plain blue sky background. Ike wanted a photo within a photo of him in the lakefront, him and Navy Pier, him and wild lions, him and wild wolves, 5 copies of each. And this is Ike and wild lions. And Robert wanted my mom in front of a mansion with a Hummer and money on the ground. So we also use these photos. This is Tyrone's photo of TAMS Year 10, of course, in the legislative campaign. So we made them into postcards and displayed them in the State House. And we were in the State House waiting to meet with legislators as they came out of secret meetings about prison spending. I was going to say a little bit more about the campaign, but I think I'm going to skip ahead in the interest of time and say that. So then after Governor Quinn actually closed TAMS, our governor proposed the outright closure of TAMS in 2012. And then, of course, we had a year-long fight to close TAMS, which I was going to go into a little more, but I think I'll skip ahead in the interest of time just to say that after TAMS closed, photo requests from Solitary expanded to other states, and we now house the project at Solitary Watch, which is the national watchdog group focusing on solitary confinement. And so the campaign is now directed by Jean Casella, the artist Janine Olson, and me, and we're working in other states. Incidentally, we ran the closure campaign out of an office that doubled as an art exhibit in Sullivan Galleries. And in 2014, after TAMS closed, we used the same room where we had the TAMS Year 10 office as a different art exhibit, which was the TAMS Year 10 family room, where we combined the furniture of family members together as one family room. And this process had started from photography, from visiting each other's houses. That's with the photographer Sue Kim, who's amazing, and you should look him up. And so this is Paula's house, Annette's house, Annette in her rocking chair, which was in the room, Nedra. And these are more traditional photos that we use. Lucia, Akeem, Aviva, who's on the board of John Howard, Rory, and Audrey. And so for people who didn't know us, these photos put people in the context of their homes where people were living without their sons, brothers, and fathers. And so it brought this into a realm, like a much different realm. And this is Malika, that was Roosevelt. And this is Griselda's family and Johnny. And we also used this living room space to show our support for Governor Quinn, who was running for re-election. And everyone was very invested in Governor Quinn's campaign because, and in fact, Griselda, who's one of the moms, became a critical and beloved person in the campaign office, and she organized major turnout for parades and did a lot of work and basically served as a receptionist. And she was chosen from the Quinn campaign to have her portrait taken with the First Lady when she came into town. And other family members were in photos and in campaign literature and commercials. That's Janice, Lucia, and Mercedes, and Johnny again. And they felt very connected to this person who had made the courageous decision on their behalf to close TAMS, even though he was really punished for doing so in the political realm. So I'll leave it at that. I guess here's a couple of notes about the current state of the campaign. So I'll leave it at that. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Lori. It's amazing to hear about these projects. And I'm curious to know, in your estimation, what do you think the role that kind of these creative endeavors, the photography, the poetry, played in the ultimately successful campaign to shut down TAMS?
Well, it absolutely would not have happened if it weren't for these campaigns, in my opinion. And that's partly because they were, as I kind of described, they were a fuel to both illuminate the conditions in the prison, help people meet and understand and change, have a new recognition of the people in the prison and their families, but also it helped us redefine ourselves to each other and to the community, and and kind of constantly be in negotiation about who we were and what we were doing.
And I also love your photo request from Solitary Project, and I'm curious how you think that is functioning to kind of draw attention to these psychological harms of solitary confinement that you mentioned at the beginning that might otherwise kind of remain hidden.
Well, I think, as I kind of tried to describe that, I think that project in particular has a different role than some of the other ones, because it doesn't ask people to do too much except kind of imagine what somebody else is imagining and why. And so it's very disarming. And so we found it to be really effective. And, nothing's effective without political organizing. Nothing, art alone is not going to do anything. But, we've used this project in other states where they have an active campaign. That's our focus. And it's a tool, to show it. And people are incredibly moved by it. I mean, I'm incredibly moved by it. And it's not always the photos, it's the requests, and people just stare at the requests for hours, one after the other, because it's very transformative. So I think it's been a particularly effective project.
I think it's really striking to me to see people's actual handwriting. There's something so personal about the mark that you're making. It's like almost like a drawn mark.
Yeah.
That is really kind of affecting and emotional. I'd like to open it up with some questions for the whole panel, but just really quickly as a reminder to our audience members, if you have questions at any point, feel free to type them into the Q&A box at the bottom of the Zoom, and we'll save some time at the end to answer these. I'd like to ask anyone who's interested in taking this one about kind of the role of creative practice within the context of incarceration for people who are incarcerated. And I'm interested both in kind of formal practice, like in the form of the classes offered by PNAP, but also informal self-generated work. In your experience, how can this type of work be transformative for the practitioners?
Pablo, I feel like you were ready to go.
Yeah, I was until that's a bit of a loaded question. So if you want to boil that down a little bit more, Gino, can you be a little bit more specific or say just a little bit more?
Sure. I'm curious about how the role of creative practice can have an impact on the experience of people who are incarcerated. And I know, Pablo, perhaps you could speak to your personal experience, or Damon, I know your experience teaching within Stateville. Either one, I'd be very interested to hear.
Yeah, awesome. I mean, Lori Jo just, highlighted that perfectly in her slides when when she said people were just trying to feel relevant. Being lost in there, it's not that you're sitting there idly, it's that there is no purpose. And when there's no purpose, there's a loss of hope. And even in that space, which I'm very familiar with, it's a process that helps you maintain sanity and even more importantly, your humanity. For me, it was an escape. I having gone through the most vile of treatment that man can inflict upon each other, and I use that term just because that's the term that's used. It was a refuge for me to run back and find what was left of my art supplies, right, so that I can have some release, because there is no release other than violent interactions amongst ourselves. And it's important to find a constructive release that actually deals with some healing, right? And doing so was liberating, even after having, had your stuff taken away. And maybe I had one instance where it was just a piece of lead that I stepped on the way back to the cell that I used to make art. Um, it was not just liberating, but that was also myself a sign of resistance. Because not only are you told having your stuff taken away from you, your subject matter is also controlled. You can't draw what you see in there, because what you see is a security threat if taken, upon, if somebody else were to see it, what I'm saying, because you're showing security structures or anything of that sort, which is stifling, to say the least, because that's all you know. That is your whole existence. So trying to tell people what it's like, it would only make sense for one to show exactly what your living quarters are. And that's not a very popular image to be showing out, to the public. But yeah, both liberating and it was for me a form of resistance.
You know, art, art is a way of expressing yourselves that many other things cannot. I mean, in ways that other things cannot. You said you enjoyed seeing the handwriting. That is the mark of the person. This is you're getting information about the person through the marks of their hands. So their physicality. The way that they're processing things. So making work is a way of, on so many levels, expressing yourself. And for the most part, people want to, as Pablo and Lori Jo said, they want to feel relevant. They want to be heard, and to be able to create, avenues that people can be heard on the other side of the wall, and the power of being able to express yourself is amazing. And as an artist myself, to be able to help facilitate that is an honor for me. So like making marks, being heard, and creating proximity. Art creates proximity to people's emotions, to their feelings. People are very moved by things that other people make. People can connect and feel empathy just by looking at marks that other people make, And then if those marks are connected to emotions and content, then you can create, proximity and emotion and care for people that you don't know. And if you care for people that you don't know, you might care what happens to them, and you might care about the policies that are being created that will destroy them. So that's like what I think the power of making art behind walls is.
A common thread that I see in kind of all of the projects that we've discussed so far tonight is that they're kind of breaking down this barrier, this dichotomy between inside and outside carceral spaces. And I wonder if you could speak a little bit to how you think your projects function in this way, and how they're kind of serving to bring people together on both sides of this divide.
Well, I'll speak from my personal engagement, right? My personal engagement is, being able to share the work in multiple genres and formats with people, and to have discussions about the work, and know that people on the outside are creating dialogues. And then I get to go back in and talk about what is happening as a result of their work. And the people that are coming together to discuss this work that is being created and crafted by people on the outside, right? So I, sometimes when I present this work in classrooms, where I get to have these discussions with, variety of young people, and they're taking on the issues of incarceration, and they're asking questions about it, asking questions that they never would have considered, otherwise, or some of them would never have considered, and some of them have to consider them. But also having this be a conversation that people are now ready for. Like when I mean, Lori, Joe, Pablo, you guys can attest to this. When I started in 2014, people weren't having these discussions publicly. It wasn't like, now you can have a conversation about prison abolition, and people are ready for the conversation. So having these conversations, having people form relationships through art, for example, gets people ready for the next steps, the policy conversations. So I'm not sure if I answered your question, but that was my experience.
It kind of leads me to a question I'm interested in, because I mean, Lori, Joe, you mentioned art itself doesn't create change. It's the next step. It can take you to the next step. And so I'm curious how you all think that art about incarceration or by incarcerated artists might have this potential to transform public perception, and then how can that lead to policy change, and what needs to happen for these kind of sequential steps to take place.
Yeah, I would love to jump in there, because I think my position is unique in the sense that I'm in the community having these conversations. And let me tell you, these are difficult conversations, right? When I'm introduced in certain neighborhoods, I'm coming to areas where there's like victims rights groups, right? And I'm coming here as a perpetrator of violence, right? And one of the questions is, how dare I come to this space, right? And when I enter there is, how dare I not? How I dare not come to this space after being a perpetrator of violence. We have an adversarial system that pits us against each other, and there's never a time when someone who's perpetrated violence has the ability to actually confront the individual or the family members of the victim, right? So when I enter into these spaces, there are tough dialogues that are had when I'm being presented as somebody who advocates on behalf of and champions art from the inside. So when I present that question of how dare I not, it's easy to transition from the work itself, because our work is generated to address the social ills, right? To kind of show the 16-year-olds that didn't have the mental capacity to make the decisions that they made, right? We know that as a society, because we limit their rights by not allowing them to have cigarettes and buy liquor and all that, but we will send them away for the rest of their life. When we start having these discussions and seeing each other as brothers and sisters and fathers and mothers, we make these connections through the art, and now it's more personal. It's not a statistic. It's not a label that's being used, violent offender and all. These are big tools that they use to section us off just amongst the populations that are directly impacted, right? When these conversations reach into the realm of, I do a lot of political work with like legislators. When I go into their spaces, their image of what somebody who has been directly impacted is just not realistic. It's some Hollywood drama that's not representative of what's actually going on, right? What we're having here is a mental health issue that's going on out here with all the trauma that's people are suffering. We need to address those and look at healing, and that's kind of what art has allowed me to do, is just have those difficult conversations, right? People don't have the answers, but just starting with the questions has been awesome, because we were having dialogue now. We were just at our corners where we couldn't stand each other because we didn't even know who we were. But now when we have these questions, when we have these questions and we have these conversations around these questions, it's not so much about the pain that I'm feeling, but it's more about the healing that I need to get through. And it's just going through our emotions and dealing with them. You know, it's difficult as a perpetrator of violence, and it's very difficult as a victim of violence. I've been in both shoes, and let me tell you that it's important to heal if we're going to move forward. And that's what I feel art is doing, is having those conversations, those healing conversations.
Another thing I'm hearing, both kind of from what you've described, Pablo, and Lori, what you talked about with the way that the kind of reappropriation of the state photography in the TAMS Year 10 campaign is like seizing the tools of the state and then repurposing them. And so the state it uses rhetoric to separate people and to label people, and your projects are relabeling people, removing the term violent offender, the worst of the worst, and using labels like family member, father, mother, taking the tool of photography and repurposing it in order to restore someone's humanity and to kind of make them visible in a way that they weren't otherwise. So I'm interested in kind of, how these tools are repurposed for a more kind of liberatory end. I want to leave some time for the Q&A. We're getting a little bit close to 7 p.m. So I'm just going to read some of the questions that have come in, and everyone feel free to type in more questions if you have them. We have one question. How do you think about artistic practice as a means to a political goal versus as an end in itself? Is there a different focus for one versus the other? Tension? Does anyone want to take that one?
I can start anyway. I mean, I think that's a really good question. And I think as many interesting projects, and as my co-panelists pointed out, and I pointed out, you know, each one has a bit of a different role and different function. And it's, as I said, when I said that art alone is not going to change policy, there has to be a certain amount of organizing and structure to persuade people to do things. And art can play a role, as Damon, and Pablo both were really described well. There's a bunch of different roles it plays. But I guess I just want to mention one thing about the tension. I think there is a tension in the art world and in other places about it. And there should be a tension, because art is also a form of working through materials and form and content, for non-political purposes, right? And so I think that tension is appropriate. And I guess I wanted to mention one thing while we're talking about this, and I think I tried to bring it up at times in what I was saying about the photography, but thinking about photography, thinking about the image, thinking about the role of the photography, the role of the state in excoriating people with photography, and then what openings that leads for, et cetera. I guess just to quickly say, the project I'm working on now, which is with the Chicago 400, who are people on public conviction registries. So they're basically some of the most shamed by the state people. The state by design is putting people online to shame them and, make them feel horrible and make everyone feel horrible about them. And it was actually doing some art projects that were performance projects on that issue that I actually just came to understand the issue so much better. And then in working with people on registries who are homeless, we did this year-long drawing project. And it was in that project with no external audience that we really rethought this issue and came to new understandings of the issue and new kind of a new analysis of what this issue was. And that's because we just engaged in this rigorous map making, thinking and making project. So anyway, I appreciate that question, and sorry to take so long to answer it.
We have another question about the restrictions at Stateville and at other facilities in Illinois that Pablo mentioned regarding the types of art that incarcerated people are permitted to create. Pablo mentioned that incarcerated individuals aren't permitted to depict the security environment around them. And the question is, how are those rules enforced and what kind of surveillance is involved? And then also, how does PNAP deal with or negotiate those regulations?
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, so everything produced within IDOC is highly regulated. As I imagine, it is across all security facilities, all correctional facilities. It's difficult to navigate something that's arbitrary. There are rules that are in place. Those rules can mean different things depending on the date and maybe weather of the day. Um, Unfortunately, well, currently, there are efforts to refine that and allow for more creative liberty, but currently we're dealing with that restrictive past that Illinois has had, where they've gained control of their prison systems and they will not relinquish it without a fight. So that means stifling as much communication as possible, so that there is an easier control mechanism for the inside. It's all on in regards to population control. And art, as Lori Jo was mentioning earlier, and as a historian, has been played a major role in social movements, and I can imagine why it would be silenced, especially in a corrective, well, not a corrective institute, but a security institute like a correctional facility.
One last audience question. It's from Paul. He's curious about your thoughts on Arts for Redemption, which is a project in Colorado that sells art created by incarcerated people and splits the proceeds with the artists. Is this a positive use of art in rehabilitation, exploitative, or maybe a mix? I'm not sure if you all are familiar with that project or have thoughts about it or that model.
I am not familiar with the project. However, as somebody who's directly impacted, I have qualms with redemptive narratives. That is always the narrative that's expected of somebody who has been directly impacted. Unfortunately, that doesn't take in the case of the different institutional factors that made, I'm saying, incarceration, much more prevalent, especially in the communities and communities of color, right? So, having, to redeem yourself after having suffered, I'm saying, racism and institutional racism and all that, I find it troubling, especially when I'm involving myself with folks who have not committed a crime, right? So, part of one of our exhibits, it revolves around the John Birch torture survivors, right? John Birch is notorious for coming and torturing victims torturing confessions out of innocent victims. So, what type of redemption narrative would they have as somebody who's been directly impacted but have not committed a crime? So, it doesn't encompass everything that has to do with just incarceration, and I would love to change that narrative, saying, into a healing narrative, right? Because I think in order for us to come together as a society, we need to address some of the hurt that's out here, so that saying, we can stop hurting each other, because hurt people hurt people. If we address that and focus more on healing and less on redemption, we would be, in my opinion, I feel we would be in a better place.
Thanks so much for that. And I wanted to wrap up by asking if audience members are interested in getting involved in this type of work, what's the best way for them to do that?
Awesome. Well, you can reach us at pnap.org. There we have newsletters there that we send out regular updates on the stuff that we have going on. Also the different partnerships, you know what I'm saying, being in partnership with Chicago 400, Pro Illinois, and other organizations that are doing great work. I'm not big on social media, so I'm not going to drop any of that because you probably won't get ghosted there, but maybe one of these other folks would, and that's what I have to offer.
I have also abandoned social media, but it's terrible. So we're all connected, and we're all part of the same team, working on a lot of the same things together, and so yes, let's do it. Please work on the team. I'm going to drop the link to Chicago 400 Alliance, which I didn't talk about very much, but it's because I was talking about the TAMS campaign, but this is the current campaign. And if you wanted to ever invite the Chicago 400 to speak or learn more, you would really be impressed and amazed. And we could talk about the art and role of photography, but there's a lot more information there. And we should all shout out Pearl, Illinois while we're at it.
Also, if you're interested in looking into teaching with PNAP, on the PNAP website, there is under the support section, you can learn about how you can go and look into that.
Wonderful. And I just want to give a huge thank you to our panelists. It's been amazing to hear about your work and to kind of dive into the way that these issues intersect. And thank you also to all of our audience members for joining us tonight. And to round out the evening, I'd like to turn it over to Jennifer Volenkatz, who's the Executive Director of the John Howard Association.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody. Hello, Lori, Joe. We were trying to reach each other today. First, I want to start by thanking the YPB for putting this event together. I'm sorry we couldn't all be together in person this darn pandemic. Just when you think, right, we're going to get that chance, life gets in the way. So hoping for next year. But thank you all for joining us. Thank you to the YPB for putting this together. Thank you to Ginia for doing such a wonderful job moderating this conversation. And I especially want to thank our panelists this evening, Damon, Pablo, and LJ. Thank you so much for sharing your work, your energy, really inspiring stuff. The work we do day in and day out at the John Howard Association, going into prisons, talking to the people who are incarcerated there, finding out what their concerns are, is much, I don't know what the opposite of artistic is. It's very linear. It's very, we think in very clear what's here, what's not here, what's happening, what can we document, what did we observe, what did we hear. And there's so many other ways to make change. And it's always so inspiring to me to hear from our partners in the work who come at it through such a different lens and view narratives so differently than we do, that it really helps push the conversation and include so many more people in the conversation. So I really appreciate that. I just want to lift up a couple things that you each said that really struck me this evening. Pablo, you talked about art as a community breaking down isolation. And I think that is so amazing and so true. I remember when our friend Archie Cheney was still in IDOC and used to send the cartoons, his amazing drawings and just so much satire and so much just beautiful. They were inspiring and smart and awesome, and he continues to make beautiful art. But I think that's exactly right. He needed to be heard. We wanted to hear what he had to say, and he shared it with us in this incredibly amazing, unique way that really got the point across. And I so valued that, and I feel like that really encapsulates kind of what you were talking about in terms of one of the roles art can serve for the people who are in custody. And Damon, you talked about how art creates proximity, which I think is so something more people should say more often. I don't know if that's if that's out there in the world, but if it's not, let's help get it out there, because I think that's not only true, but really important and such a great way to think about it. And you also talked about how it gets people ready for the next steps. And I think that's really important as well. I think it's a way we start to all tie some of our work together in laying groundwork, building platforms, and then pushing together. You know, LJ, you talked about the photography exhibit a lot, and, you know, I hadn't seen some of those, which were clearly taken as sort of mugshots with staff, and looked to me like staff intervening, which were so incredibly telling, right? And all I could think about is our many, many, many requests over the years to be able to take photos during our monitoring visits. And, you know, here's news that won't surprise many of you. We've been turned down every time we've requested that. It's actually not true. We were given the opportunity, and what happened was they take the pictures for us, and they're incredibly manufactured, and it's more like John Howard staff standing somewhere as opposed to the things we would really like to document, right, with photography. But when you talked about that, it's fuel to illuminate conditions in prison conditions, it struck me that, again, I've been thinking about that so literally, right? Can I take a picture of that cell? Can I take a picture of the standing water? Can I take a picture of the water coming out of the faucet that I can see from here is brown? You know, and the pictures you showed were so powerful and so much less direct than anything I've ever thought of. And to me, that just speaks the power and the role art has to play in the fight, you know, we're all engaged in. So, you know, I just want to, again, thank you all for being here, for being part of this really interesting, I think, important conversation. I really enjoyed listening to it. I always enjoy when I get to listen and don't have to participate in the conversation. So I really get to listen in a different way. So thank you for that part too. And mostly thank you for joining us this evening. And, you know, we look forward to watching you guys and staying in touch and fighting together, you know, to see what we can do with art, with monitoring, with advocacy, to, you know, make life better, you know, and really fight for the humanity of the people who are in custody in Illinois. They need all of us.
Thank you.
So I don't know if anyone from the YPB, Junior, you coming back? Thank you.
I'll just hop back on. That about concludes our program for this evening. I just want to thank everyone involved, and really delighted that we were able to raise funds for such an amazing organization as John Howard Association. And with that, thank you all. I'll just drop the link in the chat one more time if people want to buy last minute raffle tickets. We'll conduct the drawing after the conclusion of the event, but and check the JHA website for upcoming events as well. Thanks so much.
Thanks everyone, and good luck to raffle ticket holders and purchasers. They look like some cool things. Thanks everybody. Appreciate everyone's support. Have a great night.
Bye.
Thank you for having us. Thanks for all your hard work.